I love Norway. I think about it every single day and I miss it every single day. Can't wait till I go back. Yeah, I really miss the food in Norway. It's not really known, like when you think of Norway, it's not like, oh, Norwegian food. Like it's not like the first thing you think of when you think of Norway. But for me, it was a lot of like comfort foods, a lot of what I ate in Norway, and that's what I grew up on. Meat with like potatoes and then vegetables. And that's a lot of what they eat. They ate a lot of potatoes, a lot of fish. My favorite thing in Norway was salmon. They have the best salmon in the entire world. Like I don't care who you think you are, but they have the best salmon ever since I came back to the US. Every time I eat salmon, I'm a little disappointed because it's just not as good. It really isn't. And it's probably in Norway that I learned to cook salmon the best because I had it like twice a week. Like I would just buy it at the grocery store almost every week because it was just so much more affordable because it's more available there. Something that I really liked is something called rislunch. I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of like a rice pudding, kind of. And it comes in like a little cup, like you would imagine yogurt comes in, but it has like 2 little compartments and you pour like this jelly over like the rice pudding. And then it comes with like a little spoon that you can eat it with. And it was just like a really yummy snack that I would take on the trains when I was traveling. And then the bread, I really loved the bread in Norway. It was amazing. And when I got here, I was actually kind of sick because all the bread here just had so much sugar in it. Yeah, I still miss the bread in Norway. There are a lot of weird foods in Norway. I didn't really eat a ton of weird ones because I know there's some dishes that are really traditional that are like weird, like fermented fish or like lamb's head, but it's not as common. Like they don't eat it as much anymore, and so no one ever made those kinds of dishes for me. The weirdest food I ever had was someone from Ethiopia made me like a traditional meal and they ate with their hands, and I was like, oh, because in Norway, you almost never eat with your hands. You always use a fork and knife, like always. Even with a hamburger, I learned to eat a hamburger with a fork and knife. Like some people do just eat it like Americans because it's kind of influenced by American culture, the new foods and globalization. But they really do eat with fork and knife in Norway. So then I was taught like you hold your fork in your left hand, you hold your knife in your right hand, and then you hold the fork upside down and you scoop the food on. Yeah, it's just like a technique that you have to eat. So probably the weirdest thing was when I had to eat that Ethiopian food and they're like, no, you use your hands to eat this, and I was like, what? What do you mean? And then one other thing a Norwegian woman made for me, I love her so much. She made us this funny dessert that I had never had before, and she had taken cottage cheese, you know, the chocolate powder that you make chocolate milk with. She had put that in the cottage cheese. So she like flavored the cottage cheese to be chocolate, and then she put in like this fancy like goblet and then put like raspberries on top, and we were like, whoa, this is really inventive. So that honestly was like the weirdest thing a Norwegian ever gave me. I mean, I ate it was pretty good. No Norwegian made me like really weird food, even though it does exist there. I never tasted anything that was like really gross or anything. I liked all the food there. I don't think I ever had lamb before I went to Norway, but especially around Easter, they eat a lot of lamb. That was like one of my favorite meals that I had. Was a woman made us lamb like with our dinner, and it was like the yummiest meat I have ever had. It was super good. So I really love the lamb in Norway also. Not the head though. Didn't have that. Okay, so we have days where we just basically get ready for the week. We do our laundry, we go shopping. On that day we also go try and do something fun. We go on a little adventure, you know, maybe visit a museum, go on a hike, something simple, something fun. For our activity one week, we decided to buy these little sleds that only your bum can fit on. It's just like this big, and then it has a little handle. So you put it under your bum and you like hold the handle, and then you just lift up your legs and then you just slide. So what we did is we hiked up this huge like mountain for, I don't know how long the hike took, but pretty long. And then at the top we just sat on our little sleds and we just like flew down the whole mountain, and it was so much fun because there was no like path. It was just powder everywhere, and so we just got so snowy and so wet, and it was so fun. So that was one of my favorite memories, and that was right when I got to Norway. My biggest culture shock when I got to Norway, I probably would say just the language. Before we go to Norway, we study Norwegian for 6 weeks. You're getting like 5 hours of Norwegian every day. So it's very heavy studying for 6 weeks. And I just remember when I got to Norway, the first time someone spoke Norwegian to me, it sounded like Chinese. I think I just sat there with my mouth open, like, did you actually just speak Norwegian to me, or was that Chinese? Because they spoke so quickly and added little filler words in the middle of the sentences that I didn't know yet. And so I think the biggest culture shock was, did I actually learn Norwegian in those 6 weeks, or did they teach me something different? Because I felt like what I was hearing was completely different than what I had been learning, especially because my teachers were Americans. They were amazing teachers, but they did have a little bit of American accents, and they did speak very slowly and very simply, so I would understand them. So I took French in high school, and so I kind of had tried to learn language before, but I didn't actually try that hard, because in school you kind of just study for what the test is for. You don't actually talk to people in that language. You don't really apply it. So I feel like Norwegian was my first attempt to really actually try and learn a different language. I found it to be pretty challenging to try and reteach my mouth how to move, because I found that you really did have to move your mouth differently in order to make the sounds that they were teaching me, and say the vowels different and consonants and all that. I remember being really tired all the time after being in class for several hours or after studying. I just remember just having droopy eyes and just being so sleepy because my brain was just so tired of trying to translate everything that I was hearing. And so sometimes in class I would stand up. I wouldn't sit in my desk. I would have to stand up while the teacher was teaching, because I told them, I said, I'm so sorry, but I can't sit down because I'll fall asleep. And I remember feeling like that for a long time when I went to Norway, is just being tired because my brain was just trying so hard to translate everything everyone was saying and translate what I wanted to say in Norwegian. But as soon as you start learning quicker, then it's less translating, and then you just automatically are able to think in Norwegian, and then it just comes a lot easier, and then you're not tired all the time. It was really challenging, especially because I always lived with Americans. I think that if I would have lived with a Norwegian, then it would have been way easier. Even though after living with American, I was out all the time, talking to Norwegians, meeting Norwegians, serving them, teaching them. I spoke a lot with natives, but I never lived with natives, and I think that's a different experience. So I think that I was somewhat limited in my capacity to try and learn, but that really pushed me to set goals for myself, and I decided I was going to quit speaking English after a short time, because I decided that it was holding me back and keeping me from progressing, and I wasn't satisfied with my rate of progress, and I decided that was something that would help me. Something that I'm so happy that I did was, throughout my entire time in Norway and before, while I was getting trained, while I was learning Norwegian for those 6 weeks in the training center, I took video recordings of myself speaking the language. I sounded so bad. It's really awesome because I can hear the progression of my pronunciation as well as flyt, like flow, and the fluency kind of. It's so hard for me to listen to the videos. Oh my goodness. It seriously pains me. It pains me to try and speak how I spoke at the beginning, but I probably said like, hi, jeg heter Sarah, jeg kommer fra Salt Lake City, jeg har en familie. Oh, it was so bad. When I watched the videos, I think, did I really think that I was good? Because I was like, wow, I'm really catching on to this so quickly. And then I go back and I listen, and I'm like laughing so hard. I cannot believe my teachers told me that I sounded good, because I sounded seriously horrible. And I seriously cringe every time I listen to those videos. My family's actually from Norway. Quite a few generations back, actually. It's my great-great-grandma that moved from Norway to America. So my grandma has been in contact with a distant relative for probably 15 years or more. I'm not sure. And she went to Norway one time and visited him. His name's Arve. So she had his address and she had his email. So when I was in Norway, I emailed him when I was in an area that was like a 30-minute drive from where he lived. And so I emailed him. I think he was sick the 1 week I was going to try and visit, but then eventually we were able to just go stop by. I was just gonna go try and see if I could find their house from the address that he had sent me in the email. So I went and bought flowers from the store, and then we tried to find their house, and it was so hard. Like, we kept driving on all these streets because the streets are just kind of crazy, and we had a GPS and everything, but it was so hard to find their house. This was the address that my grandma had sent me. And so finally we come to this house, and I'm like, okay, I think this is the house. So I go knock on the door, and it was not the house. But the guy that answered, I was like, hi, I'm from from America and I'm living in Norway now, and I'm looking for my relative that lives here in Nashness. And then I told him his name, and the guy that answered the door, he's like, that's my friend. And it was a crazy story because Norwegians, they're very private people and they have like a few close friends. It's not like in America where, you know, meet someone and then boom, immediately they're your friend. Or, you know, I feel like in America things are more surface level and it's easy to be like friends with people without having like really deep relationships. But Norwegians, they have very deep relationships with people, and so because of that they have a smaller circle of friends. And so it was crazy that I had managed to find the wrong house, but that it was one of his best friends. Then he was like, no, this is the complete wrong side of the city. Here's his real address. Here's his phone number. And then he's like, I'll call him and tell him that you're coming. And I was like, oh no. Okay, so then we finally found the house, and it was getting kind of late, so we had to hurry home because it was starting to get dark and I didn't want to like scare them. So we like walk out of the car and we're like walking up to the door, and I see someone kind of like looking through the window. Like they're looking at us thinking, what are these people doing? Because you don't just go knock on anyone's door, you know. It's kind of weird if ever a stranger comes up to your door and they're like not invited. But anyway, I knock on the door and they're like, hi. They seem nervous because their friend had called them and said, there's 2 English ladies that are coming to visit you. Like that's the words he used. He didn't say like girls or Americans. He said there's 2 English ladies. So they were like expecting like women. I don't look very old, and when I came and knocked on their door, they're like, oh, like we didn't expect such cute girls that are just so nice and pleasant to come visit us. We were like intimidated and we thought we were gonna have to speak English with you because our friend had told us that you were English. And so they were really nervous because they were like, oh, now we have to try and speak English because apparently she's our relative and all this. And so when I was just speaking Norwegian to them, they're like, wow, this is so easy. Like we were really nervous for you to come visit us because I'm just some stranger that's gonna come knock on their door and speak in a foreign language. But that's the night of how I found my family. And then they invited me back. They were like, please come to dinner. Please come share a message. Tell us a little bit more about why you're here, because I wasn't able to stay very long that night. So I was living in a place called Asker, but then I moved to Drammen, but luckily that wasn't too far from where they lived, so I could still visit them from where I was living later in a couple months after that. So that was one of my crazy stories, was finding my family in Norway, which meant a lot to me. And originally when I went to Norway, that was my big motivation for learning Norwegian, because I wanted to find my family and look them in the eye and say, I learned Norwegian for you, and I worked hard so I could communicate with you and tell you about what's so important to me and why I would come all the way here and learn this language. So it was really special for me to be able to meet them. The culture in Norway, originally, I didn't really understand the culture at first. You know, you go to a new country and you don't really understand it yet. You know, you're not integrated. And so I remember first arriving in Norway and kind of feeling out of place, kind of feeling disconnected because I wasn't fully integrated in the culture. I feel like a really big part of the culture in Norway is the language. Being able to understand what other people are expressing and being able to express yourself and express your personality is huge. And I feel like I began to understand Norwegian culture a lot quicker and more deeply when I really embraced the language and when I decided to stop speaking English, which is something I did after I had been in Norway for about 4.5 months. I decided, okay, no more English because it's not helping me anymore. So that's something that really helped me love the Norwegian people when I loved the language, and I really kind of decided, okay, this is where I am now and this is what matters, and so I'm gonna forget the past and I'm gonna really focus on Norwegian. And yeah, like I said, once I did that, my love for the culture and the people just grew exponentially. But Norwegians are generally more private than Americans. Very private, very a little bit more closed off in the beginning. And it takes time to get them to open up and to get them to trust you. They're not people that trust people very easily. But what I found was after developing a relationship with them and after proving myself or proving my love for their culture and for their country, they really opened their hearts and opened their homes. And the relationship that I then had with them was so deep, and it still is there's so many people that I still have such great contact with, that really care about what I'm doing in my life, that really reach out to me, and they want to know what I'm doing, they want to know how I'm doing, because the connection that they make with others is so deep when they let people in. And that's something that I really value and I really cherish about their culture, is the depth of relationships that they have and the loyalty, the fierce loyalty that they have to their friends and their family. It's unlike what I've seen here in America. Cost of living, yeah, very different. So Norway is obviously one of the most expensive countries in the world. I think it might be second or third. I'm not sure. I felt like clothes were similarly priced in Norway. Maybe people won't agree with me, but I felt like they were pretty reasonable. Groceries are more expensive. Yes, housing is very expensive in Norway, very expensive. Transportation is very different in Norway. Public transportation is very big. You can get almost anywhere by taking the bus or the train, unless it's really remote. I got really used to taking the bus everywhere, taking the train, meeting new people on the bus and the train. That was my favorite way to talk to people and, yeah, meet new people, was by talking to them on public transportation. And it's just really convenient. They have a really good system there. This is something my grandma told me before I went. She said the one thing that I noticed when I got to Norway was how clean it was everywhere, that it was really clean. And I mean, where I live in Utah, it's also very clean, but I did find that Norway was probably one of the cleanest, like, larger cities out there. Because if you think about large cities in the US, like, for example, New York City or other cities, they're pretty dirty, kind of a little bit gross, a little bit grimy. But Norway is really a really clean place. Like, the punishments for things in Norway are much more minor, especially for punishments for crimes of people under 18, minors. I think the US is a lot more harsh when it comes to crime and other felonies or misdemeanors or things like that. One other culture difference was probably that Norwegians eat dinner really, really early. They eat dinner at 4 p.m. I mean, some families eat a little bit later, but at least in America, we eat later at 6 or 7 or 8. I know families that even eat way late. They eat at 9, which is crazy, because usually by 9, I'm like getting ready for bed. I sleep very early. But I think that was kind of different for me to eat dinner that early, but I liked it a lot. Well, one of the activities we do as missionaries or volunteers for the church is we go out and we talk to people and we see who's interested to hear our message. And one night we were out and we were knocking on doors, and we knocked on this woman's door, and she was so nice, and she invited us in and gave us waffles and soda, and we shared a message, of course, and she's like, come back, because you guys should try on my daughter's bunader, which are like these traditional Norwegian dresses that they wear on the 17th of May, which is Norwegians' Independence Day. And so she wasn't super interested in our message, but we decided to go back on our preparation day, just as like an activity to go visit her and see if we could do any service for her, help her out with anything. And then, yes, look at the bunader, or the bunads, I don't know how to say it in English, the bunads, and try them on. And so she let us try on her daughter's, like, amazing, they're these white blouses, and then it's kind of like a tank top, kind of, and then it's embroidered with beautiful just stitching, and then they have, like, brass clasps, and as well as, I don't know what you call them, silver, like, embellishments, like clips that you put on, just super expensive. And her name was Toril, and she told us, like, email your parents and tell them send money so you can buy bunader, because they're just so beautiful and it's a big part of Norwegian tradition. So that was a really fun experience to try on a real bunad, and yeah, it was really heavy actually, but I always wanted to buy one, but yeah, they're pretty expensive. Det som jeg vil si til det norske folk det at jeg uendelig takknemlig for den tiden som jeg fikk til å bo i Norge og få oppleve kulturen samt som språket og naturen og maten og alt mulig egentlig. Jeg takknemlig særlig for folket som tok imot meg, selv da jeg ikke kunne forstå norsk så godt, og selv om de ikke engang kjente meg, de som ville åpne sine armer og ta imot en som kom fra et annet land, som bare ville dele budskap, eller det som var viktigste for meg egentlig. Jeg vet at det var meningen, det var mye mening, det var mening med at jeg skulle bli sendt til Norge, at jeg skulle være frivillig misjonær der, fordi det var så mange opplevelser som jeg opplevde, som var til meg personlig, som virkelig skapte det mennesket som jeg er i dag. Jeg jobber veldig hardt til å holde norsken min ved like, og det er noe som er kjempevanskelig i USA, men det er noe som er veldig viktig for meg. Det å huske på det som jeg lærte, og det som er en stor del av meg i dag. Og jeg vil bare takke de som jeg kjenner i Norge, og også de som jeg kanskje ikke kjenner, som er gode folk i Norge, som påvirker andre, og som hjelper andre å føle seg inkludert, og gir andre en sjanse, og de som er åpne for å lære noe nytt. Og ja, det er det jeg vil si til det norske folk. Takk. Takk for at dere ser på denne videoen.